Mic check 1 2 3 4. Mic check 1 2 3 4. And we're on the
and intrigue with Dr. Zhao's thinking, and I get that, so we'll let him speak. And the next, you want to learn about innovative ideas aligned with thinking in order to change your practice. And that is basically the biggest thing with the risk-taking involved with this model, and what we found was it really is your practice as a classroom teacher. And the instructional strategies that you need to use to empower our kids with this kind of thinking. And that was some of the, quite honestly, that was some of the hardest part of this implementation, just in our first year. Your familiarity with entrepreneurism and product-oriented learning. So not so much. Inquiry-based learning, a few more, getting up more familiar with just the process of inquiry-based learning. Personalized learning, huge now. You know, we all know we need to personalize learning and talk about teacher-student collaboration. So still a lot of room to grow in that. So basic familiarity with it is what I see. And really what we mean when we talk about authentic assessments. So a little bit more familiarity with that. Thank you. So now we know who our audience is, and that will help us kind of speak to some of your questions. All right, so I'm going to pass the mic. Oh, I'm going to mute mine.
Thank you for coming in. After lunch is always kind of interesting to get you to work. Thanks, Kay actually done a lot of work, making QR code work. I've never made QR code work. I thought I can just take a camera, scan it. It never worked for me, so I'm going to practice later on. And you can also connect it. That's all right. There's nothing to be sorry about. Everything works. And by the way, this morning, you saw me actually going through a lot of slides. I have like hundreds of slides. You can download. I always pick the ones that I like, that depend on the audience. And my presentation is never the same. So just I can start from any slide and go talk backwards. So that's something. But before that, I was actually going to show you something. Because this morning I was talking about different paradigm of education. Depends on how you define education. It's really, really important for us to think about this. How many of you are familiar with this old show called Father Satucci's 5-Minute University? Have you heard about this thing? Okay, I'm going to show you that video, and you will see what it means. It's really interesting about what does education mean. It's called a 5-minute university, okay? So we can reduce university to 5 minutes.
I think it don't matter where you go to school, Italy, America, Brazil, it's all the same. It's all just memorization. And it don't matter how long you can remember anything, just so you can parrot it back for the test. And I got this idea for a school I would like to start. Something called the 5-minute university. And the idea is that in 5 minutes, you learn what the average college graduate remembers 5 years after he or she's out of school. Would the cost like $20? That might seem like a lot of money, $20 just for 5 minutes. But that's for like a tuition, cap and gown rental, graduation picture, snacks, everything included. You know, like in college, you have to take a foreign language. Well, at the 5-minute university, you can have your choice. Any language you want, you can take it. Say if you want to take Spanish, what I teach you is, ¿Cómo está usted? That means, how are you? And the answer is, muy bien, means very well. And believe me, if you took 2 years of college Spanish, 5 years after you're out of school, ¿Cómo está usted? Muy bien, about all you're going to remember. So in my school, that's all you learn. You see, you don't have to waste your time with the conjugations, vocabulary, all that junk. You just forget it anyway, now what's the difference? Economics, supply, and demand.
Well, you can have the rest. That's 5 minutes already. We have an internet problem? We still have an internet problem? Well, let me refresh and see if you can do it. I can't even refresh. Sorry about that. The rest, it says, we teach about like theology. He's a priest. His theology department teaches about is that where is God? Good question. The answer is that God is everywhere. That's the theology, right? And there's it. Why? Because He likes you. That's the answer. So that's he talks about the whole thing, about the whole idea. So it's really interesting. From the 1970s, this came out. It talks really a lot about what do you mean by education. If education is memorization of information, or is it through which you actually develop some skills and talent? How many of you took Spanish? Honestly, many of you, right? I don't know if you can still, handle ordering a cocktail in the summer. Just go to Cancun. You may not. So I think today the idea I was showing you this morning was talk about. We've been always emphasizing trying to talk about knowledge compliance with authority. And none of the authority is going to give us what we need. And actually, no matter what test scores you get, it doesn't matter. From the international test like PISA to anything else, it only shows you comply. You give me the answer somebody wants. No matter they cannot claim what a great test is, like the new test. It just simply says, you give me the answer I want in the way I want it. And that's not going to cut it. That's not going to cut it. So people have a lot of new hopes for new assessment, won't do anything any good. There's another thing I neglect to tell you is that when we try to fix some of the basics, we sacrifice huge other talents. So let me take one example is I give is a guy called Michael Phelps. Remember that guy, the swimmer, American swimmer? He's ADHD. He would not have been your best reader in class. Would not have been. So in today's spirit of education reform, if you wanted them to be a good reader before you could swim, that's what we're doing now, right? Like in New York, in Denver, from many places, you cannot swim unless you can read. If we did that, this guy would still be hooked on phonics in some basement. He would not be swimming. We sacrifice tremendously. Another example I gave, I didn't get a chance to talk about is the idea about we consume a lot of art today. Almost everybody consumes some forms of art. Remember, art was not consumed by the regular people, ordinary people, several hundred years ago. You really have to be wealthy and powerful to consume art. So the art talent itself was not valuable. There are many artists, they were not useful. We turn artists into basic assembly line workers. But today, art suddenly becomes very valuable. Then, which comes with another interesting story, goes with dyslexia. Dyslexia interferes with reading. That's why we have treated it as a disability for a long time. That's why. And because they're not good at reading. But new research shows dyslexic people have a different kind of brain wiring. So it causes interference with 2D spacing. That's why letters kind of come together. But these people, the dyslexic people, are extremely good at graphics, especially 3D graphic perception. Remember strength and weakness? So that was weakness in reading, but strength in art. And then actually not only art, they are great at depth perception. So they make some of the best astrophysicists. You guys, I don't know, you should try this. At night, when you walk out the sky, most of us good at Virgo, like I'm at Virgo, I cannot see the depth. I think the stars and moon, they're all like hanging out on one piece of, flat piece of paper. For me, I cannot see the moon as something round. I don't see the distance. But dyslexic people can perceive actually depth, the distance, so they make great astrophysicists. Now imagine that right now. Today, do you want to fix extreme dyslexic people so they can read, or you want they can read artists or astrophysicists so they can outsource their weakness to somebody else? That's another thing about 21st century called hyper-specialization. If you are talented in one area, you can hyper-specialize in one domain. You can outsource. Remember, technology makes outsource much easier. So always outsource your weaknesses. Do not make everybody mediocrely good in everything. Capitalize on their strength, outsource their weakness, so help our children learn about what they're good at and what they're not good at is also very important. The same thing we talk about, growth mindset, great. One big problem with growth mindset is that you should not be having a growth mindset in everything. Because sometimes there's simple stupidity. If you keep just doing the same thing, you should always avoid your weaknesses. All my life, I tell you, I have been running away from what I'm not good at. First of all, not being good at as a peasant, just can't do it. I got to go do something else. I've not been good at math. I'm doing something else. I was a kid when I was very young. I was a small kid in the village, so I got bullied all the time. Once I went to school, I loved school, and most other kids hated school. So I began to outsource my personal protection to the big guys. And they began to fight for me. I do the homework for them. It was great outsourcing. So that's the key idea of collaboration in the 21st century, is identify your strength and let others take care of their weaknesses. Because in the 21st century, does not reward mediocrity. It rewards greatness. You have to become great in your domain. And greatness takes time. You guys know greatness is not easy. Greatness takes a lot of time. Let me actually give you one example. You may have seen this. How many of you are familiar with this story of Austin's butterfly? Anybody have seen this one? Okay, good. So Austin's butterfly, you can find on YouTube. I'm just going to do this very quickly. And this is an idea about greatness. So Austin is a first-year student, and grade 1, 7-year-old. He was asked, this is from the Harvard Bromberger School. It's one of the schools that did this. So asked to draw a scientific portrait of a butterfly. Remember this one? You might not remember that. No. And this is the butterfly he ended up with. For first grader, this is very good. My kids did draw butterflies. I can tell you, on my refrigerator, never had this kind of butterfly. Okay, never had this. This is pretty good. This is great, actually. I wouldn't mind hanging one actually in my office. But what the butterfly I had was more like this. Do you notice that? That is a first grader butterfly that most of our children get. So where are our video people here? Like Riley, I'll give you another shout out. The video people, they did a great video. Most people don't do that great video. So how can we help our children get from that to this? This is called greatness. So you can imagine a Kim Kardashian. She may be completely useless, but she has to be greatly crazy to do what she does. There are plenty of crazy people like her, but they're not crazy enough to do those kind of things. So the idea of 21st century is that you have to be great, and great comes from 3 things. This is something we have to think of. Number 1, lots of time. You might have read or heard about Malcolm Gladwell's idea about 10,000 hour rules. Have heard 10,000 hours? Because if you want to be an expert in any domain, 10,000 hours is about the time you need to spend on something. 10,000 hours. So imagine how often does a student get to spend 10,000 hours on anything in our schools? So we have to equally distribute it. You want to be sports, singing, dancing, playing chess, be math, writing essays. How often they get to do it? They don't. The second thing is that 10,000 hours is not actually sufficient. You have to be truly interested. It's called passion-driven, or have some kind of talent in that domain. Because otherwise, why would you spend 10,000 hours on something? In all those. And third, this has to do with teachers. 10,000 hours is not 1 hour repeated 10,000 times. Do you know how often we repeat this? You look at your homework. Some of the kids are basically repeating the same thing. It's a repetition doesn't move anything forward. Like China, for example, people think China has 2,000 years history. And now it's not. It's 200 years repeated 10 times. So China does not move. There's no progress. So what you need is variation. So that's like Austin spends a lot of time. That's his first draft. This is his second draft at the suggestion of his friends, colleagues, young kids. Basically said, Austin, is the butterfly that small? And Austin said, no. So his second draft, variation. It's not 1 hour repeated. It's a different hour. The same thing with piano, with violin, everything. A good coach, a good teacher, a good colleague provides very good feedback, allow variation. And then you go through the third draft and fourth and fifth draft. I suggest all of you, not now, later today when you go back, get on YouTube, search for Austin's butterfly. Watch that video. Show your children that it's amazing just how we can improve. By the way, this is not necessarily something like I would not, suggest as standalone project. So before Kate comes down to talk about everything, my main purpose is to show you this, to say there are different ways to think about how do we deliver the new type of education. That's what I want you to think about. And Kay and many of you have been doing this. So when you talk about like student autonomy, remember my triangle, my 3 elements? Every school has to be concerned with the what. What do you teach kids? What do you teach kids? Traditionally, we teach based on someone else's prescription. We have the standards. We have the. What I'm arguing is that you have to base on each individual student's talent, interest. So can we truly personalize education? I saw you on the map. When we talk about personalized education, personalized education, in my mind, is not personalized instruction or learning. Means children truly can define their own interest. They pursue something that supports their interest, and they can abandon something. So to make that happen, what do you have to do? So I have some suggestions. Number 1, do students have a voice in the governance and environment of your classroom and or your school? And then in your class, for example, can children decide to say, okay, hey, I like to study this. I actually visited some very interesting classes. In one of the schools recently, a physics teacher said, you guys can nominate up to like 20-some topics you are interested in, and we're going to explore in this class. That's very interesting. Kids can try to do it. That's still not my ideal, the crazy version. That's a mild version. Because my ideal version will not be physics. But this one, since you can't change everything yet, but in your class, you can at least developing 1/3 of the class time, exploring students' interest. People can nominate, they can debate, they can argue why is this project interesting. So then you can do something like that. Can they actually have a say to negotiate with you? How do you evaluate that work? Assessment, called choice and voice, how they regulate the whole process. I will be happy to email you the slide, this whole thing. It's very derived from my book. You can use at a school, as a district, to talk about those things. The second element is that I want you to emphasize the idea about student choice. Can you have a broad and flexible curriculum? Can you have that in your school? And that means children, the breadth, it means that you can get children to exposed to a lot of possibilities, because children have no idea what they're good at, not what they're bad at. They're good at everything. That's our kids, or they're bad at everything. You want to give them the chance to try a lot of different things and explore those possibilities. You also want children to come in to develop new ideas. I talk about globalized campus. Can your students bring a project? So I want to study, Japanese chess. And I found this thing. Would you allow that to happen? I want to design some new stuff. There's a lot of examples of this. And of course, how do you support this personalization? Because children have a personalized approach. We need a lot more mentoring. This is this morning, I didn't get a chance to say this. Why teachers cannot be substituted by machines? Because you are human beings. Machines can do the cognitive and information. They cannot replace the psychological and emotional piece. That's what. So I gave you a little slogan I gave yesterday. I said, never send a man to do a machine's job. It's from Agent Smith. Okay. Never send a woman to do a machine's job either. You literally let machines do what it can do. Transmitting and storing information. You do is the non-cognitive, non-academic part of it. You create environments, like do you have mentor? I think actually schools have to become social institutions. Do you have houses, social clubs? You can do all of those things. The second element, which I think Kay and others will talk a lot about, is I kind of revised the term project-based learning to product-oriented learning for a number of reasons, but one of the main reasons is that I see lots of project-based learning are fake project-based learning. They are meaningless. And my children have engaged in a lot of nonsensical projects, just they don't do anything. There are some of the classic projects teachers do. Kids sit them through right away. You just get me interested in stuff. I know this stuff. I don't need to do this. It's more efficient. What I'm interested in is Given the availability of this technology and information, can we truly turn our education into just-in-time learning? That is, children are engaged in making things to serve a purpose. Authenticity. Do they serve a real purpose? So you ask your brother, do they make something that somebody actually needs? Do they create something that somebody actually can use? It's now, you look at America, it's in a very, very good situation. Our kids consume so many resources. Learning, for learning's sake, is okay. But I still think we have a social purpose to fulfill. We cannot just simply have the luxury to learn everything because I just like. We got to serve somebody's needs. There's so many problems. Get children engaged in learning to solve problems from get-go. That cultivates the entrepreneurial, creative agenda. Because a good creative person, an entrepreneurial person, has to serve the purpose of bettering other people's lives. You cannot just be so selfish. I just enjoy reading. Yeah, that's fine for you, but you know how much resource we're consuming to our kids? $115,000 per kid for 12 years. You know how much we can buy, and the idea of global competitiveness is a silly concept. How are you going to compete with someone who can't even go to school? Do you want that job? You should create opportunities. So when I use this authentic product, we think about three things. You know, are our children making meaningful, authentic products that serve somebody's needs? And also, you know, do they go through a sustained process? We could talk about product is useful only when it's great. A lot of our children's products, you know, based on project-based learning, you probably notice them. They're not meaningful. They're not fun at all. I've said, I know you guys. I go to so many school board meetings. Kids produce PowerPoint. When they come in, they're really bad PowerPoint. You know, they have all these different colors of fonts. They use still pictures that's, you know, never the right wrong framing, bad lighting. Do you notice those things? But we are proud. That's great. Now we should never reward kids for being mediocre. We reward them for being great in something. So actually, you're punishing. You know, I don't know if you read Afrikaans. In Afrikaans, if you actually reward too early, you're punishing them. You're saying you're captain. You have to move. That's where growth mindset works. In a certain domain, growth mindset, creativity, great, all are domain specific. You shouldn't be every place a growth mindset. Like, I never try myself on, you know, playing tennis. I would never even try that myself. I might become one, but yeah, I've decided not to. You gotta focus. Remember the 10,000 hour rule? So over here, do you force kids to become, to have a sustained and disciplined reason? Creativity, unless it's disciplined, is not very meaningful. Everybody have a flash of creativity some moment, but you have discipline. That's where knowledge comes in. People debate with, oh yeah, creativity has to rely on knowledge. That's true. What knowledge? Is it imposed upon? Is it sought after? So that's what you have to go after the knowledge. Let's go over there. And then it should be strength-based, which I already mentioned about. Based on the strength of the teacher, of the local community, of the student. Somewhere you have to go work on this one. And the last one is global as a campus, which, you know, I'm not going to dwell a lot of time on this. So be happy to share this with you. There's not guidelines. And there's a basic, some ideas I said you can use to begin a conversation. I hate giving people rules and step-by-step things because that's not entrepreneurial creative, but some people need somewhere to start. So at the same time, based on these three elements, the publisher, Corwin, is asking me to work with a group of practitioners to co-write 3 books to gather examples, and also in the process, what kind of obstacles, problems they run into. And I'm very honored Kate Tucker is going to be a co-author. So if any one of you has been doing something similar in this domain, please let Kate know. We want to include your story in the new book. Because in the book, we're not trying to prescribe how you do it. I think there are many different ways to do it. We really want to talk about the context. Some of you may not have been so successful. Some of you may run into trouble, your case test scores dropped. Some of them may run into the first time case did not go that far. I want to be able to use the opportunity to answer this question, to say, what does it mean? There's something that's meaningful to collaborate in those domains. So I'm going to stop there, and then Kate and Millie, right, to work with you to say they have much better plan, all those kind of things, and that they know what you're going through. I'll be hanging out here whenever you need me. Just come back, talk to me. Thank you.
much. Some of the stuff that you touched on is so true, and I'm really passionate about myself, and that's really working on the strengths of kids and really finding those strengths and how to do that. And we'll go through, but first I'll give you an overview when we get back up on the screen. But I made an analogy for today, and it's on the screen. This is interactive, and I want you to play around with it. It's kind of like if you're a skier, the green slopes, and then the intermediate slopes, and the diamond, and then you get to the black diamond. So really, when you jump in with this, some of that fun stuff is right in the beginning. Get your kids involved in real world stuff. Get them involved in inquiry, and try to find that personal passion of theirs, and that can be really fun. And I have resources for you about that. But then as we got more into that product-oriented learning, and we had all those questions, and the teachers would be saying, what do I do from here? But then when you get down to the globalization piece, it truly is the expert friends. I guess my correlation with this is there's very few of us who can just really jump on a black diamond slope, first time you put on your skis and hop in, right? And so I'm giving you a lot of that information to just get started with that and jump in and on that comfort zone. Even if it's pushing your comfort zone, it's like you really have to have some things in place to build upon to get to that global sustainability piece. So hopefully, but my goal for you guys today is a couple things. Number one is that we generate conversation. Like you said, we really want to know your questions, your examples. So if you can join those communities or email me, I didn't put my email on that, I should, but or Dr. Zhao, we really want to make those connections. So my hope is that you join our discussion, you come away today just being inspired to do something, and that maybe you create your own little personal network. If this network is too big, just find somebody at your table. Find somebody who you can connect with who might be doing similar things or working through the same processes. So that's kind of what we're going for today. So if you guys look, we're going to spend a little bit of time just taking world-class learners to practice, and then we'll move on into the other one. We may skip around and do parts and pieces, but please note it to always go back to this and use it as a resource to guide what you may want to do. I think what I'd like to do now is I'm going to have Mindy speak. First, we're going to show the district is putting together videos for all the schools, and they started with our school. And it's really awesome that they did a really nice job. It's way more professional than anything I could create. So I want you to watch the video about Lone Tree Elementary. And some of the stuff going on in this video is the result of the product-oriented learning. And so just kind of see what you can pull out from this. And after that, I'm going to have Mindy speak to just our Lone Tree's journey, why we were kind of right for this, and what it means to have that culture and climate that can lead to the center.
We're a magnet school, so every family opens up here at Lone Tree. We've just had a fabulous experience. Kids really are empowered. They know that they can be leaders in their own world and learning environment. It helps you with everything. One unique thing that you notice right away at Lone Tree Elementary are the enriched environment, that nurturing component we have, that absence of threat, homey touches, very non-traditional approach to the classroom environment. I can just see the way they're thinking now. It's bigger out of the box. We still follow the state standards, 21st century approaches to world-class outcomes, which are driven by the district, and then also layer that with 21st century skills. Trying to find problems, identify solutions, work together as a team, and then see your results. And those are the things that are going to build resiliency in kids and to make the learning sustainable.
This is the Kids for Colorado Youth Expo.
One of our focuses is really to empower students to be able to lead and work in a 21st century environment.
And this is what fire can do. Boom.
There's a lot of excitement in here because our fourth graders have started with the questioning process to get them on some type of path to where their interests lie on natural resources in Colorado.
You can save 75,000 of those trees if you just recycle the Sunday newspaper every week. Oh no!
They need to be able to take charge of that learning and know that they can contribute on so many different levels, and they're not just sitting and getting all this information from teachers.
Stone and ice compress and they make the glacier.
Coming up and teaching each other things and learning how to work in groups.
How does the structure of cities affect trade-offs?
We know that kids need an authentic approach to learning. If they just learn in a textbook, it's not going to sit and resonate with them.
Wondering how their removal might affect forests.
You know, here's something that we study, we break apart. Now, how does it apply to your real life?
Fill dishwashers with dishes before you start it.
And we use standards in the context of learning to really drive that.
Okay, prizes.
But the biggest thing we know that kids learn best by doing, so we want to give them lots of hands-on experience and be able to compete really in a global market.
This is it's a Comatus. Get out the way!
Oh, we always say if we give kids a platform, there's so many great things that they can do.
You want to dig a hole?
If we limit that based on what we know as adults and try to really front load them on every level, we're kind of robbing them of opportunities to expand their knowledge.
So we raised money to plant these things. We raised over $350.
They've done so many neat experiences that empower them
Go right there.
to think entrepreneurially.
And they teach you life skills. It's not boring.
That's where we get innovative approaches to thinking for kids. I like that thinking. I think that'll serve them well for life. I wouldn't even call it work. I love coming to school each and every day. Okay, can you all hear me in the back as well? Okay. So one of the things that was highlighted in the video is where we were primed to do this at Lone Tree Elementary. We started as a magnet school, so all families do open enroll, and that really caters to their elements of choice. They want to find the best unique environment for their own child based on their needs, their location. There's a variety of reasons for that. We began our process as a school focusing on micro-society, which wanted to add components of the real-world element, but in a very simulated environment. So we branched away from that and moved into more social political action projects. Those two were more in an isolation type of atmosphere. So then as a school, we brought together all classrooms, all teachers, and we wanted to take a community approach to that. And so our overriding theme was making a difference in our community with our own two hands. And a lot of that was driven by the standards. Teachers looked at their social studies and science standards and were looking for overlapping areas that they could then draft some type of approach of. For instance, in kindergarten, they look at being citizens of the world, and they did a shoe drive and brought shoes to Tanzania, and then did odds and ends chores and things like that to earn money to give for a starting school there. So we partnered with the Playing for Change Foundation and brought about that. On a much more global level, sixth graders were looking at bringing clean water to areas in the Western Hemisphere, which is a component of their social studies and science standards. So we use that to drive the context of learning, but then knowing that we can let students really take ownership of that and come up with some higher order thinking questions and find answers or solutions to problems that they've uncovered in their research. Part of our school too is about getting kids into the environment because being their experiences can kick off much of our learning. So rather than sitting and front loading as a teacher elements of the water cycle, we might take them to the water treatment facility first. Because some students have no idea what they might be studying, but they really do get their interest piqued. They start to get a little bit more engaged, and then they're taking more ownership of their learning when they get back to the classroom. And then we will do more of a culminating activity, which ties all those loose ends together at the end of the unit that we might be studying. So that's where we were really primed to be where we are today. It's still a work in progress. And there are bumps in the road, of course. We get lots of questions from teachers. We've had a lot of change in our district and our building alone, just with transitions of teachers, and trying to get those teachers at the same level that some of their teachers have been there for a couple of years is a difficult task. There aren't many teachers that are arguing against this approach to teaching, but they just want to be knowing what their resources are and how to do it. So that's one of the great pieces of K there. We know that teachers will take risks themselves if they are in an environment that fosters that and is really supportive. And I say it could be an abysmal failure, but let's try it, because having a better approach to instruction isn't going to get you worse results. So I think that was highlighted in the video. Our parents are really supportive, so it comes to that community and support with staff, teachers, students, and I won't lie, it's difficult, really difficult at times. One example I can share with you, we had 6th grade teachers that were really willing to take a risk. They lost sight of the context of learning with regard to standards. And students were really excited about all these variations of things, but then in the end, there was no common element. We couldn't bring it back to center on an enduring understanding or an essential question. And that's where teachers knew that it got out of their hands. And so just kind of reeling them back in and saying, this is a great learning opportunity. And in the end, students were empowered to take risks. They do want to make global changes in this world. But if we have to be the people sitting in front of them every day telling them what to do and how to do it, we are going to suffer that. So I think Dr. Zhao has highlighted that really well in his keynote, just that they really do start out at a level of excellence. And it's just our job really is to help sustain that and to keep their interest and curiosity. And we can do that through innovation and enterprise. That entrepreneurial thinking, those were 3rd graders in that video that put on. Well, 4th graders did the Colorado Expo. 3rd graders are building the garden. They wrote proposals to the Boy Scouts, Eagle Scouts. They wrote letters to Home Depot to have wood donated and soil donated. That turned out a letter written by neighbors. So writing those proposals and giving them the chance to have the platform versus the teacher having to do all that, we really saw a wealth of knowledge among those bodies. It was pretty impressive. And amazing to see as a principal that we've got a long way to go, but we're really trying to future. What we want to do is highlight the process some of our teachers went through in taking on entrepreneurial and innovative thinking. So they did some staff development. We did once a month, every teacher met as a collective team through a planning grant initiative through our district. We were able to fund that. And they worked collaboratively with Kay as well as the professional learning specialists to really get them primed to be able to bring this to students, to feel equipped to do that, to see themselves as a resource. So Kay is going to highlight what that process looks like. Thanks, Mindy.
Okay. Well, mine is enough. Okay. We're going to head into getting into kind of the down and dirty of some of the procedures and processes and systems that are put in place. But you guys, and then after that, you're going to have a little bit of table time to discuss and move forward that way. But do you have any questions for us right now, based on any of what we've just seen? No?
Yeah, so when you talk about getting kids to greatness in one area, what about those kindergartners who do need, and early learners who need to experience a whole wide variety of the gamut of opportunities to know what that area is that they can and should pursue?
Such a good question. I'm new to the mic. But anyway, so I think Mindy highlighted about the struggle over there. So when I talk about you pursue one area, it doesn't mean pursue that all the time. So you may actually try something after, until people go to college, realize I've been pursuing the wrong thing. So what I would like to do is a very broad curriculum, very broad experiences. Kids will go out there, they will say, that's interesting. Sometimes they're interested in something because of friends. So you want basically, you hold them to high standards. When they produce anything, produce something, that's great. So but you do not deprive them of other opportunities. Remember, kids are they're very social. They're always extremely interested in all kinds of things. And they will have to realize. It doesn't mean they don't do anything. My kids, my daughter's doing all kinds of stuff. If they have the energy, they can pursue, but somehow eventually they will drop somewhere. What my argument is this idea is that we want to hold our children to become great, but without depriving them the chance. So that's what reflects on very broad. Another thing I think Mindy mentioned is very interesting, which if I were so there's Mindy brought something really, really problematic right now. All teachers, all students, schools, you are under constraints of standards. You have to deliver those things. That's why, if I were giving a policy talk there today, I would be much more critical of those things. So you are dancing with shackles, all the time. So you have to deal with that thing. And I have my own view is that I actually got an email yesterday from a teacher who is going to become a teacher and be reading my book. She said, now what I'm going to do with this content? And I said, well, first of all, I would encourage you to think you're a professional whose primary responsibility lies with the children, not the bureaucracy. And so I would like to remind you of that. However, in some districts you may have more than this. I would hope, like Mindy, you would at least allow teachers, you allow them a chance to do it. I think if you give them long enough time, eventually these kids will be able to deal with these basics very easily. The basics are not that hard. I really think in this country, we've treated the basics as this city. So, the whole country pursuing reading and writing and math, that's very safe. Those are very basic stuff. So now we spend so much time dealing with the basics, we deprive children of the opportunity to engage, to do something else. So we need courageous leaders like Mindy who will be able to think of questions from principals. How many of you are from parents? How many of you are here are principals? Oh, what? Yeah, you can do it, And you have heard of this thing called loose coupling? It's like educational policy, we talk about loose coupling. That means parents come to complain you and say, oh, this teacher is doing this thing. They say, yeah, we'll take care of that, but you will never talk to the teacher. You still let the teacher do something. You make the parent happy, the student happy, because eventually, when you produce some amazing results, it takes about 5 years. Parents will come to you to say, that's great. The example I write in my book is High Tech High. High Tech High does not offer IB, doesn't do AP, doesn't do any of this stuff. Actually, about 100% of the kids go to college. Oh, yeah, that's why you go to High Tech High. I just founded by one great person. That's what they did, and that's all. So it will take time. It does take courage to do this thing, and some districts may be more right than others. But thank you for that question. Any other questions? Yes, please.
Can any of you reflect a little bit more on this theme of entrepreneurialism and on a broader scale? I mean, you think that, in terms of going against public education, what is they need to get jobs. It was like entrepreneurialism. That's great. And so, and I appreciate age appropriateness in terms of like, okay, what do kids care about? I guess I just want, because I think this is a newer theme in education. But you see that in terms of we're inventing products that are actually not going to go for donation, we're going to charge money for this.
I'll take a crack at it, and then they can follow up. Anyone can follow up on this. Entrepreneurship, this idea, remember, I think this morning I mentioned about it. It is a concept that's been expanded, and it is actually directly connected with the proactive learning, even like proactive citizenship. The same thing we're talking about. So it's actually not the idea of this making product to sell, to marketing, which is part of this. But also like when you see a problem we don't like, we want to solve, traditionally when you say, okay, we got some traffic problem. The kids can come up with some idea, maybe they have different traffic pattern, route in different ways, or you want to save the environment, that's also citizenship, dealing with poverty. These basic instruments that take an active role, creating solutions and all products and services to address problems we face, either locally or globally. That's what I think. I think in our education, for a long time we deprive children of that opportunity. It relates back to citizenship, relates back to civil engagement, it relates back to a lot of different things. That's in my thinking. The reason we use entrepreneurialism, I use the term really for probably two reasons. One is that, because as you know, the public education agenda in the US has been very much hijacked by business people. If you write something else, that means I don't care about what this is. So you know, more fuzzy stuff doesn't get us competitive. I want a term that actually you will agree education has a contribution in that area. The second one, I couldn't really find another word, another phrase to replace it. Because if you look up the dictionary, it really means proactively undertaking a big enterprise, do something. You know, that's what I picked up. Anyone else want to say something?
I'll I'll just speak to a little bit is, you know, it is like, so do we expect all of our kids to go on and have a product or service, right? And something that makes money. I don't know, is that kind of what your question was about a little bit?
This is how.
Yeah, how it all plays out. You know, what we found, just even on the elementary level, is that the kids are so excited to create their own pathway, whatever it is, and to have the opportunity to do that. Our community loves the fact. We had, we talked about it briefly at one of our PTO meetings. I mean, they love the fact that the kids would be getting the skills to become entrepreneurs, whether it's a social entrepreneur or whatever. And because our community knows a lot of them are entrepreneurs in our community, and they know the value of all that. But I guess I have to speak is you know, some of the, what I call on-ramps, off-ramps, some of the opportunities we give to our kids, and how we can maybe break down just a typical assessment and have it go across the years to really result in product and services. And that the kids are used to doing that, and we create common language about it. I think there's a lot of power in that. Anyway, so what I want to get you guys engaged here a little bit. So, and maybe you have been already cruising through the resources. But if you want to click on the entrepreneurism and product-oriented, this is a backward plan. This is the PD professional development course that I developed. You know, we have our sand pit, our sandbox. The staff at Lone Trail Elementary is kind of my sandbox, so I've been kind of messing around with them this year, and we've come up with steps for next year. So this is the whole shell. Use it as a resource if you want. Across the top are basically resources for you. But where this change in paradigm really lies is in what teachers do differently and students do. There used to be a great video from Declara, and all of a sudden it disappeared. But basically it had, gosh, it was great. It's passionate. These young kids saying, I will capture the portraits of poverty. I will tell this story. I will crowdsource environmental solutions. I will create a mobile movement, social network. I will learn to own my own business. That's really what our young generation wants to do. And those are pretty innovative ideas, right? I mean, we don't typically look at our kids and say, well, what we're all going to do right now is we're going to put on this mobile movement, right? So then I took that. So what does that mean for us as teachers? So from a teacher's point of view, what do we need to be doing? We need to empower your students to connect, to learn. We need to let them create. They need to map out their own pathways. We need to give them access to global communities. And we need to remove the obstacles of traditional education. That's just really huge. And give them the skills to turn their ideas into action, freedom to initiate the change. And you also need to create that learning environment that promotes creativity, innovation, and that they will learn to solve problems differently. Okay? So that's just that students are the change. That's kind of what we're looking to do here a little bit. Okay? So if you go the next step over, and this is pulled, I think it's right from chapter 9 of Dr. Zhao's book. And I'm not going to read this because I want to get you guys engaged a little bit. But basically, this is what the definition of it is. We want to have students learn as they examine and research current issues in the world and create products or services to solve those problems. The process. And here's where I want you guys to kind of engage, kind of look at this, and then engage in dialogue a little bit at the tables. Because I didn't mean to do Bronco colors, but I could have, because I'm a Bronco fan. But so, really, when we have our kids identify the needs, the blue is what the students are doing. And then that orange piece is what we really need to be doing as teachers. So what I'd like to do is give you time to look at this page, process kind of what that means, and maybe have a discussion at your table about it. We give you like 10, 15 minutes to do this. And then, actually, I'm going to have you SWOT it out. So you may have seen the SWOT analysis on your table. So that's a business world kind of thing. I was actually helping one of my sons edit a brochure for a site visit from the CEO of this corporation. He said, would you read this? And along the way, I saw this SWOT analysis. And so common thing used in the business world, but if we want our students to be entrepreneurs, this could be a great thing to do with students, right? So we look at our strengths. So what would the strengths of this model be for you? What would the weaknesses be? And what are the opportunities and what are the threats? And as you look at the SWOT model, you will also see that some of those are internal and some of them are external origins. I already probably know what might be in that bottom right quadrant as far as like the threats coming from external sources. But live a little bit, take some time, look at this, what teachers do, what students do, and have a conversation at your table. And feel free to write all over that paper or just think about what the strengths, weaknesses, and threats or opportunities to this model of teaching will be. You guys good with that? Raise your hand if you have questions and we will circulate.
That's the big draw.
That's me. And I'm well, I was an She goes, I'm going to go on Saturday.
Watch this.
All right, I think we'll pull it back together. Great discussions. I think you guys are really getting to the heart of the issue here. And so, I guess I would just really like to have, I was in on one discussion. Would you mind sharing what you did? Because it always comes back to, teachers, even though we put kids in a context for learning with this inquiry, and it might be based on that, we are all still really worried that they aren't going to have the skills, they're not going to do well in the tests or whatever. So who's got the microphone? Okay. Yeah, I would love a peer from, go ahead and introduce yourself. That's Kevin.
My name is Holly Norman. I'm a second grade teacher. Was a second grade teacher at Stony Elementary, but I've moved up to third. And so Kay had come to our school and done a PLC day with us, and it really inspired me to that, along with who also teaches at my school, sixth grade, connected me with Monocle. And so Kim did a Google chat with my kids, starting with this book that was all about global outreach. And so we started talking, she got the discussion going, well, what's going on right here in the state of Colorado? And this is right after the flooding happened. So anyway, the kids started brainstorming ways that we could reach out and help, whether it was flood victims, whether it was, so we did that, and then we started brainstorming ways to raise money, or if we wanted to do clothing drive or whatever they wanted to do, and then we combined all of those, and I said to the kids, and at this point my team wanted to be a part of it, and so I said, but my kids were upset with that because they were like, yeah, this is ours, this is our project, and so I said, okay, what can we live without or give away? Because we probably couldn't have made it all happen on our own, and then let you guys really do. So they wanted to have this movie made and raise money. They said in terms of like making posters or doing a book or clothing drive, we can give some of that up. But anyways, we did have a movie night, and the other classes, one class did a book drive, one class did a clothing drive, one class did posters. But for my class, they created speeches, so they went around to all the classrooms, and they were so, just their love of learning, their excitement. They created the speeches, created what they wanted to say on the website, put on their school website, they wanted, I call them committees, but they wanted companies. So they said, according to our companies, we had one group make an iMovie that showed before our movie night, and then we had one group put together a Google presentation to share research and stuff of like how that's impacted our community. So anyway, it became this whole involved process, but to just see the kids' excitement and love of learning was awesome. And I was really afraid to let go of the testing and
to talk about your map scores and stuff.
and with the map scores, with the RA testing, and this, in my 17 years of teaching, these kids made the greatest growth of any other group I've had. So that was really beneficial.
Yeah, so that was kind of our conversation here, is nobody wants to get rid of. Thanks for sharing.
So I don't know if that's along the same lines, but I would love to even make it more personalized.
Right, so personalize it even more, but along that, the kids do learn the skills. They do learn, they learn despite us, and they learn when it's really they're passionate about it.
And because they had a purpose, there was so much more.
Yes. Yeah. Anybody want to share out? I don't know where your discussions went. Anybody want to share out anything? Strengths, weaknesses, threats with this kind of, or if you even got to that point or just kind of discussed about the model? I'm just because of time, I want to give you guys some time to live a little bit in some of this resource that I have created here. One of the things is how do you create that context for learning and to drive the process, maybe the inquiry process. If you aren't familiar with it, there's a great, the Right Question Institute was a bunch of teachers from Harvard, I guess. They've got the wireless thing going. But it's called the question focus technique. And if you guys have it up, it's one of the resources up there at the top. But it was really a powerful thing to get our kids to develop some questions, because that's kind of the hardest thing. And I think as we continue and our kids know the process of generating good questions, because, number one, you put them in the real world, but then how do they ask their own questions to personalize their own learning? And that's a huge, huge piece of this. So, sorry, but anyway, so it's up there. Let me see if I can get to it this way. Learning to question. But it's kind of a protocol for questioning. So that's what a lot of our teachers did. So they created a question focus, and that would be within the context for learning. And so when you go and you look through some of these resources, you'll see that every grade level created a slideshow to get the kids thinking. I would also like to put them out in the real world to generate their thinking on a field trip or some natural place. But that would be key, the learning to question. You can look at performance assessments. There's some ideas about just real-world performance assessments and what that looks like if kids are making proposals, they're making, what am I trying to say? They can make multiple things that like to use to market a product that would showcase their learning. So is everybody else spinning? Oh, okay, here we go. Here's the performance assessments. So even when your kids are talking, even if we have the tools to say, oh my God, it sounds like you should do, maybe you want to create a logo at this point, Maybe you want to do a brochure. Our third graders also did an event, and they started with the focus of just wanting to do good as community. It's kind of like creating products and services, and being a civic-minded person in the community. And they all divided up and created businesses for this. But they also have an event planner, so they went the gamut from having the kids plan the event all the way to kids making products. All right, so you're comfortable if I leave you. I'm not going to, you feel free to just go through this whole resource. I'm going to head back to the other site. And I'm going to show you an example of that. I think I'll just show you this, kids make positive change. And this is how you could get the kids just inspired to do something. Stream. Let you do is move into this area, because I think that here is where a lot of us might reside, next year moving forward. So within this world-class learners and a world-class resort, think about where you are, and if you are on the green slopes, if you are just up there, spend some time looking at how you engage your students in learning, and how you empower them to be creative. And so I'm going to just give you time to look at these resources. And maybe, so at the top, there's the ideas, there's some quotes from Dr. Zhao's book, and then there's some resources or things for you to think about in your classroom. And if you guys want to, are you okay doing that alone and residing in that for a little bit, and maybe thinking of things to do next year? You good? Anybody else want to make any comments, or? Totally, we'll move around. Go ahead.
When you were talking, it made me think of other models that we use, like Genius Hour, and things that are passion projects or individualized, that spend time. So how is this different? Is it similar? Is it nuanced in what you're doing compared to those?
Yeah, how do you think those play into this? Do you have a... So, well, so does it, if you had a Genius Hour, like, so where kids, or passion projects for kids to explore their passions, that's one of my suggestions in the, how you change the climate and culture of your classroom, because those are the things we need to give kids time to do if they are going to be able to develop the products and services. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm not in the classroom, but a lot of teachers do that throughout the year, and that whenever students are ready for a product, they think of whether it's a presentation to the class, or it's a group, or maybe it's a product that they create that's very unique to students' desires.
Right, yes.
That would be, so I guess that's similar, just different verbiage.
Those are all pieces, I think, of the bigger picture. So if you look at like the 4 E's, the engage is we really want to engage them in real world experiences. Encourage them with creativity and innovation. That's where those things play in. And it's like changing up your schedules and your classrooms environments. And so I have a few resources in those areas that pull those parts and pieces in. Does that make sense? And then embrace is more just really doing the product-oriented learning and inquiry-based learning based on a passion. And then the other thing is really change how we teach. Our new instructional strategies, or change how we teach. So those would all be parts and pieces. Does that answer your question? Yeah, very purposeful parts. Anybody else have a question? Yeah.
I just wanted to give a kind of neat example of high school.
Yeah.
It was like at our school, we got a cleaner and design engineering person said, what are we doing with it? And so design students design a medical Peter on organizing the art department taking on decorating it, and kids stay after school, work out the computer. A whole community life, kind of involved better than out. So the thing was that it's crazy getting in the car to sit out in front of the school.
Well, and what I didn't share, the best part of it all is we actually, the teachers, 4 teachers drove out to crazy to get them to let me in, those that they it. And this is something, I mean, like 13 out of 20 had lost. I lost our home. Some that ran, some died, all the stories. And that's what I found sure. It was just awesome. We were so grateful. But then there's so much more that we could do. Letters, but that's the best part.
So I think want to follow up on that one. Yeah, as you can see, a lot of you are doing some of this, genius hours and hours. But I'm really looking for, if it's a paradigm shift, this should become normal. Every child pursuing what they want to do. But I also recognize here, because a lot of you here are not in that powerful position to change it. So what I'm talking about is really advocating for national and state policy change. Forget about prescribing the curriculum, the assessments, so don't do that. I'm also advocating for district-wide shifting. Forget about, again, imposing curriculum, but allow children to construct the curriculum. Because many of you do this, on the side. And so what the side should become the mainstream. That's why they call it paradigm shift. It's very, very much like for making cars. The combustion engine cars, the Volkswagen was the mainstream. A few people were tinkering on the side. We're talking about these things. Then, but on the side becomes mainstream. The others get, replaced. That's where we need to go. I think that's. But it's extremely hard to shift. Let's say a paradigm shift. It is really different from thinking like, what's a paradigm shift? From geocentric to solar-centric, the paradigm shift. We're so used to talk about the sun rises and sunsets. That's very geocentric. Now for you actually to imagine on a daily basis, most of us do not think we rotate around the sun. For most people, we don't think about it. You say, well, that's a paradigm shift. That's a major change. Even a paradigm shift thinking from your conference call, TIE to innovation. That's a paradigm. You talk technology, education, integration, now you think about it. Actually, we're going to innovate education, technology happens to it. That's a very different shift. So now we talk about no curriculum is almost unbelievable in education. Because education has always been about teaching children things we think they should learn. It's always about that. It's never about growth. The children grow. We never think, we always think, we don't care how you grow, we care about what I'm giving you. And on the side, we talk about the children grow and develop. But really in the class, in your school, we are about teaching you something. And that something is described by someone as valuable and verify you learn that. So that's the big shift to say, like you were a student. Follow the children's passion. Almost you really have to have that blind faith in them. Can they move that along? That's why this paradigm is so hard ready to move. And there are few schools that have said the standards. It's not going to be successful because it's easy to go backwards. As teachers, we've always been about teaching kids something. We always want to teach them something. And then you, as Kay at the meeting said, you actually have to ask different questions when you shift to a new paradigm. The questions were very different. Not an same thing. But very few people are complaining. So I'm glad that you guys are hanging around here. I hope you can form the groups. What I'm trying to do with Kay and Wayne to build a network of schools. We're actually interested in making this shift. It's not, if it's easy, people would have done this some time ago. We would not be this here. We want to build a network of schools to put this together, towards the end. And once you have the social capital, it's easier to change right now. Right now, it's very few schools I would say have been doing this successfully, and because there's so many different conditions.
Yeah, and I agree. Thanks for saying that. It is a total paradigm shift, and so one of our sixth graders, getting back to the Genius Hour thing, I don't know why I didn't think of it, but she's really trying to switch up what her classroom looks like and the schedule, and she goes, and I still don't have a Genius Hour. And I said, why isn't the Genius Hour 24/7, right? Yeah. So that's the big. It's a huge paradigm shift. I feel like we just dipped our toes in it a little bit, and that's why I felt like for us, next steps, even though we tried this. And pretty soon, when you guys work, I'm going to put on a video of just what our third graders came up with the Wonderland Fair. I mean, no matter where it goes, I just really have to say the passion and the excitement that the kids have for doing something that's more real world, and they feel like part of that, and they problem solved it. It's student engagement is just really high, and student learning is high as well. So I'll put that on as well. But those are the challenges. I mean, the questions that you guys have. Those are the questions that everybody has. So I really would like you, if you want to engage, whether it's that join the Google Plus community for innovation and enterprise. So you might say innovation and enterprise is my kind of little business that I created within this realm of trying to have it be a model for schools or whatever, and the things that we need to do. So our next steps at Lone Tree are to really work on those 4 E's and really try to change up our schedules, try to change up our classroom environments. And really focus on personalized learning and what that looks like, you know, and moving forward with the other thing as well. So we'll keep you posted. So if you join that network, you'll see stuff as well.
But you are doing something like this?
Yeah.
This will do it that, hey, you know, I want to know your story, write about it.
Yeah.
And now I'm glad because you mentioned about it. The next step for any school, you are going to change, you will have to change. Teacher scheduling, staffing, courses, you rearrange the whole thing. For example, you wouldn't be teaching courses, teachers become consultants. That's a big shift. Every kid, you start every year, kids are organized. We want to work on this firm, this team, want to solve a problem for another country. Your global partners will not become very accessible partners. You know, we have the sister schools in another place. You have the sister school in Detroit, sister school in China. Actually, your kids are the ones who find out what problem can I solve? How can I be of use? You know, they always start something like, how can I be of use to anybody?
Right.
That's a really powerful question. What can I do? And that's to me my writing. I also start with a problem, word solving. Have kids debate about it. What's a problem? I teach a PhD course. I do the same thing. I always start asking by this. Most people in my class, teachers, principals, assistant principals, I always began asking. I said, okay, you've always got to purchase, you buy, you pay for A's. You get A's regardless of money. Don't worry about the handout of grades. I said, you do it on your own. And now I want to solve a problem. Spend 5 minutes, each of you, to come up with a problem for something you're very unhappy with. Whatever it is, in your district, in the PP, it is unhappy with. Then we will write down the problem. I got 50 students to write down. We said, look, what problem is really interesting? Was worthy of have a broader and appeal, and we will be able to say, okay, then you guys go back to work on things, pick some proposals, propose solutions to that. You debate, and then you have to convince each other. You work on my proposal, and work on this, so something like that. Something I'm trying to get this. I think our children from 12 years, they're so alienated from real life in society. You know, sometimes they feel like, so why do you even exist with these kids? Can you be of use? You know, just become. I feel very sad for our children. You know, honestly, they're alienated. You know, it's not engaged in school. You guys notice that in class? It's very sad just, you know, fulfill someone's obligation. It's just, that's not a good human activity. It's that. You really say, what do the kids do with the prison like this? You really say, we're in prison. You guys notice that you divide it every day. I feel very sad for a lot of kids. Anyway, that's so. If you are going to do it up this stuff, please, you know, we won't help, and we won't have a movement. It's not going to be easy. Eventually, it's going to change. Like the Google car is going to replace the drivers, car with drivers. We don't know how, we will when. Something is going to happen. It may take a long time. It's the same thing.
Yeah, awesome. And you know, like when I also think this real paradigm shift with the schedules, it's one of the things that was really a roadblock is the teachers were going, oh, they want to do this, they want to do that, but I've got to get on the life cycles. You know, my 6 weeks is up and I've got to get on the life cycles. And it's like, so why are we having a place in a kid's e-portfolio for them to have these projects? And they go across all, you know, all the boundaries. They don't just go across the whole year, like if they would have it with you as a 5th grade teacher or whatever across a year. But it would go from year to year, right? And we would progress monitor and see growth over time just in how that resides in that child's portfolio. Because, so that's, you know, not only our daily schedules, but just the schedules we put ourselves on as teachers for 6 weeks units, right? And that has to end with that, so. Anyway, thank you, Dr. Zhao, for being part of this. Yeah. And we have like 20 more minutes in this room if you want. Feel free to work, and we'll just put on this 3rd grade video if you just want to see how one of these things played out. And stay in touch.
Thanks.